after the election of Donald Trump, November 2024. And during that conference, we were analyzing potential impacts, thinking about what could be the consequences, what are some of the points of resistance, and thinking about the rise of the far right and increasing imperialism and fascism. And those threats today have just exploded. And as we come together and we think about the force of the Trinational Coalition, it is the ability to think across our different contexts, to analyze these diverse and often divisive um, fights that are happening across the America. And how do we work together, both within our local contexts, but in an analysis that sees the connections and the threads? Because ultimately, international solidarity and solidarity among our struggles is going to be at the key, it's going to be part of the key of having those struggles succeed and fight back on imperialism and fascism in the forms that they are taking today. So I'm really pleased in this webinar that we have speakers from three different contexts who will be speaking about three different parts of this issue. But I'm sure that as they speak, you will start to also see and make visible those threads that are weaving between the different struggles and the threads that together we can weave for solidarity and resistance. So we're going to start out hearing from these three speakers. They'll all have about 15 minutes each, and then we will open it up for questions and discussion. And we really look forward to hearing from people in this virtual room on some of your thoughts and perspectives. So our panelists, the first panelist is going to be Maria de la Luz Arriaga. She is a professor in the Faculty of Economics at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. She's a co-founder of the Trinational Coalition in Defense of Public Education, and she represents the Mexican section of the Trinational's Organizing Committee. Secondly, we will be joined by Naida Elisa Diaz, who is a Cuban history teacher and longtime union activist. Since September of 2025, Naida has been the General Secretary of Cuba's National Union of Education, Science, and Sports Workers. And thirdly, we will be joined by Jackson Potter. Jackson is a Chicago public school teacher and lifelong activist for public education. He's currently the vice president of the Chicago's Teachers Union. So with that, I will turn it over to Mari Luz, and I will be jumping in a couple of minutes before the 15 minutes are up, just to kind of keep us on time. So thank you.
Good. Should I start?
Please, Mari Luz.
Good. Okay. Before anything, I want to say I feel very honored and very happy to be here with comrades and combatants from Cuba in this moment, right now, and especially to be sharing this webinar along with our comrade Jackson Potter, who is a comrade and activist for his whole life, and he's a revolutionary. I want to start off by saying, my part in this webinar. It has to do with the general vision about the imperialist and neo-fascist policy of Trump and the renewed aggression in America in the last couple months. So I'm going to refer also to some of the other things going on in other parts of the world as well. So we're living through a historic moment. There's a huge crisis, a civilizational crisis. It's a crisis of capitalism, but that also affects economic, political, and social areas. There's also environmental devastation that is affecting us on every level. The major financial oligarchs, the billionaires and multimillionaires, have turned towards the imposition of a neo-fascist imperialism led by Donald Trump and the government of Netanyahu, who is on the run from international justice and who's the Zionist government in Israel. So I repeat that it is a fascist neoliberalism that is leaning into disposition of territories and natural resources and the social rights of workers and of our peoples. So right now they're trying to push forward direct power, not through political parties anymore, but directly through them as individual major financial oligarchs. So we thought that the genocide that we were seeing in Palestine was the limit of how far that they could go in their offenses. But the aggressions that they've shown towards the peoples of America, including the people of the US, and the war that they started and that they continued against Iran and against Lebanon, has shown us that we've gone past those limits. So when we talk about the offensive, Trump's offensive towards America, we talk about that because this continent is our home. And if imperialism manages to put their tentacles across the whole world, Trump has said that America, the whole continent, from Canada to Argentina, is for the Americans, understanding Americans not just as the people of the US, but rather the major billionaires of the US. So he's saying what's fundamental for security is territorial control and control over resources, especially energy resources. In America, in the last few decades, there have been some progressive governments who have developed out, but now we're in a backslide. Since the second term, Trump's second term, aggressions against countries and governments in America have been constant. First of all, the tariffs. Then he started to say that Canada would be the 51st state of the United States. Then said that Greenland would be his. And it wasn't enough to just leave it there. He also started to say that now the Gulf of Mexico is not called the Gulf of Mexico, but rather the Gulf of America. I think that it's important to locate all of this within the context that we're living in, that we have been witnesses of how Trump's international policy has gone past the expectations that we already had. So it wasn't like he was just talking about the threat of putting on tariffs, uh, to limit the business in the different countries and control their economies, or that he would put in policies in place that would benefit billionaires in the US. And now it's become the control of America and to try to slow down the influence of China and the BRICS countries in America, in Latin America. Then he started to claim that the Panama Canal should be returned to the U.S. Then he started talking about Canada being the 51st state. He wanted to annex Greenland. And then he has threatened to invade Mexican territory, saying that the government of Mexico is not doing enough to eliminate drug traffickers, and that he, as the powerful president that he is, can intervene in order to impose order. Then he increased attacks against Venezuela. He murdered fishermen in their own territories. He's taken control of the oil resources of Venezuela, and he had invaded a sovereign country without hesitation and even killed 32 Cuban military personnel, members of the Presidential Guard, and 47 Venezuelan military personnel and two civilians in order to kidnap Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, and his wife, Congresswoman Celia Flores, whom he's holding hostage in a New York prison. Then he intensified the siege against Cuba and he cut off oil supplies to the island, creating a genocidal policy that would deprive the people of Cuba of access to energy for their most basic needs, including food, healthcare, access to drinking water, education, and transportation. So that's a lot more than just a blockade. It's the genocide of Cuba. He also threatened the government of Colombia. He intervened in the elections in Argentina, in Ecuador, and in Honduras to strengthen their right-wing governments. And as we haven't seen in the last few years, the U.S. also began an internal war against its own people. It started against the immigrants in the country, but now they have even widened it to murdering activists. He has ripped through social rights, including for healthcare and food access. Since February 28th of this year, together with the Israeli government, the U.S. has waged a war against Iran, which has become a threat of escalation, not just in West Asia, but in other regions of the globe. We woke up scared, thinking maybe we'd be facing a nuclear bomb at any moment. So, faced with the US's miscalculation, thinking that it could take control of the Iranian government and secure the support of its people for the US's invasion, the Iranian resistance managed to defeat the war and force the US to negotiate on Iran's terms. So, in other words, they haven't been able to follow through on this pact, but they are in this negotiation. So, this check on the expansionist ambitions of Trump's neo-fascist imperialism and the genocide being led by Netanyahu is also achieved because of the resistance of the peoples of the world and the international solidarity that has been mobilized. Today, a new global Samud flotilla is sailing toward Gaza, and there are around 1,000 people participating and 100 boats carrying activists from 40 countries. Furthermore, they're also bringing a special ship loaded with materials to help build a school. In Porto Alegre, Brazil, from March 26th to March 29th of this year, there was an international anti-fascist conference, which was attended by 2,000 participants from 40 countries. This is a super important conference as a forum for dialogue, although it had the limitation of not defining short and medium-term actions. But at least it agreed to organize two regional anti-fascist conferences, one in Latin America, in Argentina, and another in North America, Mexico, US, and Canada, which also includes Central America. From our perspective, as the Trinational Coalition in defense of public education, the only way to put a stop to neo-fascist imperialism is through the resistance and mobilization of our unions, our communities, and our peoples. The massive popular protests in the United States, which have been on the rise and are no longer limited to the struggle in defense of migrants, have expanded their agenda and their struggles, and the level of organization that they've shown is also a good indicator of this. Trump knows that his administration has been discredited and that its approval rating has also been on the decline in his own country. At our last conference in San Antonio, Texas in 2024, in our analysis and in our proposals about our program of struggle, when we took into account the situation in the Americas, in the face of the rise of the far right, we determined that we need to have coordinated, organized actions at the national and international levels on broad fronts with the participation of unions in strong alliance with popular movements and communities. And within the framework of a program of struggle that goes beyond just the sphere of the different unions and prioritizes the defense of our rights of the utmost importance. The demands for no to war, no to genocide of our peoples, stop murdering our children, cease attacking schools and hospitals, respect life, and defend the right to live in peace. Those phrases unite us everywhere in the world and send a clear message of resistance and struggle for education and health, public and free. No more
Three
of
minutes,
the culture
Smarties.
of hate. Oh,
3 minutes, Smarties.
and respect for the fact that our diversity unifies us in whatever part of the world that we're in, and brings us together. Our resistance and our struggle is very important. That one topic that I wasn't able to touch on too much, but I think it's very, very important to mention right now is how education is at the center of the strategies of the far right and, of course, of neo-fascist imperialism in order to have control about the educational content and to impede people from having access to critical emancipatory education. That worries them, that bothers them. So that's what we need to understand right now. That's why it's so important to hold a webinar like this one. And that's why it's so important to organize and coordinate nationally and internationally. As our teacher comrades across Mexico say, together we will win. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Smarties. I will go ahead and turn it straight over to Naida. And for those of you just joining us, Naida is the General Secretary of the National Union of Education, Science, and Sports Workers of Cuba. So thank you for joining us, Naida.
So first of all, hello
Greetings.
to everyone.
Um,
Hugs to everyone. We're trying in a very short amount of time to talk about some of the effects of the blockade, what effects that has had on the educational sector in Cuba. So it's a genocidal act of war, which has been imposed unilaterally by the government of the US since 1962. So more than 60 years. It has violated international human rights norms and has violated Cuba's economic rights. Currently, they're taking measures to continue trying to isolate and weaken our country and to keep the people of population under control. And it's an act of aggression against against Cuba by the U.S., which has gone up, and it's unprecedented in the history of the U.S.
these include lawsuits filed under Title III of the Helms-Burton's Act,
Oh,
increased
so
persecution of Cuba's financial and commercial transactions.
oops.
Okay. Mm.
The increase in the persecution in the financial transactions of Cuba and the intimidation of against any company or country that's willing to send fuel to the country. There's also been a discrediting and defamation of Cuba. All of that has led to a lack of resources and has led people to feel unsatisfied, to cause harm to the people of Cuba. And it's also thrown up barriers against economic progress because we're in a scenario of grave crisis.
Uh,
Should we continue? So this scenario does not allow us to speak out against the economic effects which are being caused by the criminal and genocidal blockade against Cuba. Education in our country has been a central pillar of our revolution, and it is a constitutional right, and it's under attack. It's not an abstract policy, rather the economic and financial blockade imposed by the government of the US shows up every single day in our classrooms because we have less access to resources. Students are not able to access technology, and there is inevitable suffering of those who are most vulnerable. According to the reports that have been presented at the UN over the course of the last few years, the educational sector of Cuba has had direct losses of $89.7 million just between 2023, 2024, and 2025. So that impact has meant millions of dollars. So that's a collateral damage. It's not collateral damage. In fact, it's the explicit objective of trying to cause the highest level of damage possible against the Cuban people. The blockade translates into constant lack of resources, the most basic resources, the lack of essential materials, and all that is leading us to a regression in our teaching methods. For example, when we talk about perfecting the educational system, in the course of 2019-2020, they should have reached their highest level, but in terms of the current school year, 2025, 2026, we're missing books, materials in order to be able to finalize our process of teaching. The national process of educational materials has been one of the hardest hit. More than 118,000 students from elementary school and pre-K haven't had access to their reading materials, their writing materials, or their math books because of the impossibility of acquiring those supplies. The cancellation of a credit that would have allowed for paper processing from Canada prevented us from more than 76,000 millions notebooks, books. And then we also lost access to more than 45,000 pens, as well as erasers, glue. There's less access to uniforms. And there's really difficult time accessing raw materials, which has created a serious deficit of 1.4 millions of clothing for the current school year. For special education, it was made to take into account the different needs and capacities of students with disabilities or with special educational needs. However, it's one of the sectors where the inhumane nature of the blockade most shows up with most cruelty. Sanctions do not distinguish between economic objectives and the health and the well-being of children and teens. They impose disproportionate suffering to those who most need help. So the effects in this sector are a testimony of the level of cruelty of this policy. It stopped people from having access to batteries or prosthetics, hearing aids, making it almost impossible since almost all the factories or the subsidiaries in the US are the places where you can buy the batteries for hearing aids. So a huge proportion of the students who need them have been affected because of this rupture. And aside from that, 20 some percent of the equipment in the country has been deteriorated, which is affecting about 1,100 educators. So this puts an additional weight on educators who are obligated to figure out from their what to do with sometimes with inexistent resources. So that means technological isolation in the 21st century. That's what our country is dealing with in the midst of a world that is interconnected and where education can't be separated from technology. Nonetheless, the blockade prevents us from modernizing the Cuban educational system. Sanctions impose digital isolation, which severely limit the opportunity to collaborate and access scientific information. It's a barrier that cuts into educational training, research, and the possibility for students and teachers to fully join in the global community of knowledge. The effects in our universities, research centers mean more than $16.4 billion dollars. And that affects us in higher and lower levels of education and the development of technology and innovation in our universities and in our scientific, technological, and investigative centers in the spaces of higher education. Student exchanges, academic and scientific exchanges between Cuba and the US have been delayed and have faced instability because visas have not been authorized to professors who should be able to visit that country. But because of all this, the North American policies have affected us immensely. Our higher education system, and more than anything, our youth. The blockade persists, and there are important, serious, direct and indirect effects. The services that we offer have been affected by the blockade, and all this leads to day-to-day lack of resources and a lasting situation in which the Cuban country does not have access to the U.S. market, which deprives us of materials and the necessities of life and the buildings that we need, all of which are absolutely necessary to be able to offer high quality education. Our possibility of progress and access to technological platforms has been limited. Our ability to do academic collaboration, exchanges, online learning have been limited. The Cuban educators remain firm in each and every one of our schools and universities, because this is the way that we can defend our country, our homeland. Defending our homeland is the greatest act of love and of dignity. Because of our historical roots, because of our children and our youth, we say that for Cuba, we will create together because we will defend our homeland. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Naida, and thank you for your and all of your colleagues, your unwavering commitment to your students, to your colleagues and to your country. And for those of you who are looking at the chat and are from Canada, I did share, our own responsibility to pressure our government in Canada to really support Cuba and work with other countries against the imperial actions of the US. So I'd encourage other folks to look at that too. So I will turn over to our third speaker. And again, for those of you joining us now, this is going to be Jackson Potter, who is the Vice President of the Chicago Teachers Union. So thank you, Jackson.
Muchísimas gracias por invitarme. Voy a apagar
There
la
we go.
interpretación. Ok, ahora sí.
All right. I want to start by
Bueno, quiero
apologizing
empezar
to the
disculpándome
world
a todo
for
el mundo
our country and
por nuestro país
this fascist and
y
right-wing
por
authoritarian
este
regime.
gobierno derechista y fascista y autoritario.
I'm not sure if I'm supposed to hear the translation, but I'm hearing it at the same time.
Yes, sorry, Martha. I think you're in the English channel. No worries.
Yeah. So, the misery that is being inflicted upon workers and the people of Cuba, that is inhumane. It is a result of a blockade that is illegal and violates human rights. The efforts to undermine the progressive government of Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico, or wreck the economy of Canada because they don't comply with the authoritarian dictates of the White House, are part of a global effort to impose U.S. hegemony despite the unpopular policies, the economic destruction, the ways in which war and tariffs are disrupting and harming working people worldwide. So we have a administration that would rather bomb schools abroad in Iran and Gaza than fund them at home here in the United States, and would rather give billionaires tax breaks instead of funding food for hungry children, or medical care for low income Americans, or ensure that people have access to childcare and fully funded services. So we are in a moment where right wing forces have assumed power but are increasingly unpopular. This is the most unpopular war this quickly in US history. I'll say that again. It's the most unpopular war this quickly in US history. It is something we have never seen before. Imperialism and hegemony are not what they once were. There are a lot of cracks in the armor of the US superpower, and we need to come together as working people worldwide to say that enough's enough. We cannot allow, these wealthy na Christian nationalists to destroy the planet, to impose economic embargoes, to lead to climate collapse, to declare nuclear Armageddon. The dangers are many, but there are also a lot more voices speaking out in opposition, both in the United States and across the globe. So May Day this year is looking like it will be 3 times as big in the United States, where it started, as it was last year. There will be nearly 3,500 actions in all 50 states, and it will be more disruptive, where workers are saying, we are willing to consider no work, no shopping, no school, in order to test our ability to stop this right wing authoritarian government and prevent them from consolidating their power and prevent them from destroying the last remaining vestiges of democracy. And as the vice president of the Chicago Teachers Union, we are helping lead that in Chicago. Many partners, the American Federation of Labor has signed on to this. It is a remarkable turn of events that has never happened before in this way, We see that Indivisible, leading the No Kings marches, has signed on to this day of action. We have seen many immigrant rights organizations and civil rights organizations that have signed on to this. It is bringing together more groups than we've seen in a long, long time in this country. So there are movements that are growing. It looks like Trump and his billionaire tech bros who run the White House, because it is the wealthiest cabinet in human history that run the US government, they are set to lose an epic number of seats in November. Their popularity has plummeted. People are extraordinarily unhappy and frustrated. Now, that being said, they will try to steal the election. They will try to declare martial law. They will try to occupy polling stations and cities where they're going to lose the biggest numbers of their current representatives. So it's going to be up to us as a hemisphere, as workers across Canada, the Caribbean, Mexico, and Central and South America to really activate during this May Day, wherever possible, to say what May Day Strong, this growing network across the US, is saying: no ICE, no war. We want to tax the billionaires and diminish corporate power to support the things our people need and deserve. And then we want to expand our democracy, not allow it to be destroyed. So these are some of the key demands of the growing coalition. We hope you'll join us. It's now or never. There's a lot at stake. This madman is willing and has shown evidence to destroy people's lives in mass, displace millions of people, unleash military assaults on countries illegally, even if it's harming the United States. So the decisions are really anathema to the interests of all workers, all families that aren't wealthy billionaire families. And we stand together in solidarity with the Cubans that are here tonight, with our Mexican allies and counterparts, and with our Canadian allies and counterparts. We thank you for the solidarity, and let's keep building this movement against fascism and authoritarianism. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jackson. And that
Yeah.
the movement that you've been building with Mayday Strong across the US is so important. And I was just looking back as well at one of the parts of the declaration from the conference that Maria Luz mentioned, the Anti-Fascist and Anti-Imperial Conference in Brazil. And one thing that they say is the forces fighting the right are diverse and have different analysis strategies, tactics, programs, and alliance policies. Experience teaches us that while recognizing these differences, it's so essential to organize a united struggle against our enemies. And I think that's been at the heart, from what I understand, of what the advocacy that the Chicago Teachers Union has been doing in the US, and that I think is the trinational that we have a responsibility to do, that we have to share analysis, we have to strengthen ties, and we have to take concrete actions. So I would like to open it up to comments and questions from folks who are on the webinar. You are welcome to either put it into the chat, or we're a small enough group that if you want to just raise your hand, and then I can call on you to unmute and share your question or your comment. Anybody like to start? I see Alexandra. Oh, very good point. Sorry, Alexandra. And Nida will need to leave relatively soon. So we'd specifically, if you have any questions for our Cuban colleagues, it would be great to ask them now so that we can have that conversation with you. Yeah, Jackson.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, for those of us in the United States who feel a real shame for how our government is harming people in Cuba right now and for decades, what are the ways we can best help support, all the people who are struggling to survive and have their rights met and needs met in Cuba right now as Americans in the United States?
Neda, would you like to respond to that one?
Yes, yes. So, so hello to everyone. Thank you for your solidarity. It's it's- so it's something. It's it's not just the union leaders. It's not just the workers. It's not just the students. It's not the youth. It's the government who put to the test of what is possible in terms of criminal and genocidal actions. So we are um, like peoples between the people of Cuba and the people of the U.S. There's a campaign, a very major campaign in solidarity with the Cuban people, and we thank uh, the person who's in the leadership of Canada. And so now we are going to May 1st, and May 1st is going to be the opportunity to reaffirm our organizing. And as our comrade from Chicago said, we have to take public spaces, we have to come out into the streets, and we have to call for an end to the blockade in any scenario in which we find ourselves as Cubans. We have to speak out against the genocidal actions of the U.S. We have to speak out against for an end to the genocide. And we have to speak out each day as part of our revolution. So if you say, what can we do? Well, what can we ask for? We ask for a lot of solidarity. We ask for everyone to speak out. That's what we ask from all revolutionaries at the international level.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I see another hand, and I'm not sure of the name, so I will just let you unmute yourself. It's the Encarnacion Montiel. Yeah, please.
Yes, I wanted to ask, to what level has the blockade and the lack of technological access that you're having in your educational institution, how much could that be affecting the Cuban doctors who go and work in brigades in other countries? Are you talking about the health sector specifically? Is that right? Yes, that's right. Yes, so for the health sector, we can say that the Cuban people, because we have the tradition in our pedagogical work in all the years of the revolution. So without technology, how can we prepare people to be able to have a high level of scientific knowledge and have the academic support necessary to be able to go and have success in different fields? So the doctors are just one example of this humanitarian effort that we bring forward in our country. And they stand out because their level of professionalism. They study a lot. They study every day, despite not having access to technology, to books, and all the things that have allowed us. Uh, well, this blockade, what has allowed us to do is to become more creative, to be more innovative, to have more initiative, and to think, okay, what can we do as Cubans in the face of this imposed lack? What can we do? But each day we look for what are the ways that we can continue preparing and training all of our professionals across sectors. So that's the revolutionary spirit. And what that has led us to have is the capacity to create dignified, well-prepared, well-trained scientific and professional people who are able to go out in the world and offer humanistic help. So I'm not just talking about the medical doctors, I'm talking about every profession in our country, because the situation that we have without electricity, as you know, we've been blocked by Yankee imperialism, who's not allowing us to have any petroleum for the last several months. Supposedly some Russian oil came, but because there's been so much limited access, that had to go first to hospitals, to homes for older people. That had to go to the places that were most urgent. So that meant that it couldn't go to the training centers and educational centers. And that's been like the greatest legacy of our revolutionary process, is having professionals who are well trained in every single sector. So that's what I'm able to humbly transmit to my colleague and comrade here. Thank you so much. A huge hug to you and all of our solidarity with the folks in Cuba. I'm from Ecuador and we're working on this too.
Yes, thank you so much. And, it was a couple of years ago during a May Day delegation to Cuba when I was in Havana. One of the things that I've taken with me ever since was the word innovation kept coming up. And within Canada, in spaces that I'm often in here, when people talk about innovation, it often becomes a neoliberal, what technology company is going to be doing what. And in Cuba, it was firmly rooted in what are teachers doing and how are they thinking creatively about pedagogy to meet the needs of their students. And I've really held that as a way to really rethink some of the assumptions and the words and the inspiration from what all of the teachers are doing. So thank you for that. There's a similar question that I think you started to touch on in your last answer, but Sarah asked in the chat, what impact have the Mexico's aid shipments to Cuba had? And she says, I suppose they help in some way, but she doesn't know the impact. And I think you mentioned, shipments have gone to the most urgent areas. Is there anything else you'd like to add specifically in relation to that question?
Yes. First of all, I want to say thank you and express our gratitude for the solidarity of all the peoples and organizations and all the labor organizations, all the activists, the civil society organizations that have shown their solidarity with the people of Cuba. And in terms of the Mexican people, our sisters and brothers, what all that you're doing in terms of help and support in terms of food access, especially for the most vulnerable peoples, for instance, in children's centers, in spaces that care for the youngest children in our schools. Your food donations go to hospitals, go to homes for older people. So there's very rigorous control and supervision about where these things go. And I want to mention this to our comrade because the enemy is using social networks to discredit the revolutionary government of Cuba, lying and creating false narratives and opinions, creating fake opinions, and making up fake scenarios. And I'm telling you that these donations are going where they need to go. In the same way, the Cuban people, as a representative of the Cuban people, as an educator, I'm saying we are walking through the streets and I can say how much appreciation the Cuban people have with all of you who are showing your support to say we're going to succeed, and we are so thankful to you all, and we are so thankful to the international solidarity, and we're going to stay firm in our struggle. I'm convinced in this. With or without the blockade, Cuba will resist. Our revolution will resist for many years. So many, many hearts are being sent to me. And please know that you have the hearts of these two Cubans in representation of the Cuban educators, of organized and unionized Cuban educators. And we're always eternally thankful for everything that you're doing to stand with us. And we invite you to break through the blockade, that the enemy doesn't want you to come here. And so we're inviting tourists to come and get to know Cuba. They're trying to stop you, but please come. Please come for May 1st. Please come from the Solidarity Gathering on the 2nd, so that all of us can be there at the palace and we can share, or like the convention center, and we can share our own experiences, our own struggles from our own positions, from our own ideologies, but more than anything, keeping up our unity as educators across this entire region. So that's what we'd like to share with you, with a lot of firmness and with a lot of love and with a lot of sincerity.
Thank you so much. And I wanted also just to, because you just mentioned too, I never actually introduced the second person on the screen with Naida, who is Miroslava Povo, who's the international relations person for the union, and just a huge appreciation for her work and the relationship building that she does as well. So thank you. I'm going to ask Rosemary to go next.
Hi, I have a practical question in terms of the number. We've had numbers of delegations from the United States, and particularly from the LA area, and some retired teachers that were just over there. Is there any way we can get like a specific list, like the kind of batteries for hearing aids and supplies needed for students with special needs, so we can concentrate on that for the next time? If someone could provide that information either now or later, I'd appreciate it. Because we're constantly having people go over from Southern California. Thank you.
And Rosemary, and I'm sure Naida, you can jump in if there's other things. I know Kodev has also been in close contact with the union and has been putting together a list, which is one of those links that I sent through. So yeah, if there's anything else you'd like to add.
Well, always the solidarity. I was able to go to Cuba twice, and it was just incredible to support the Cuban Revolution through all these years. And I know that a lot of special needs and special education teachers would, and people in healthcare would respond to sending things over. Thank you.
Marluz, do you want to jump in?
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, very quickly, 2 questions, 2 topics. In Mexico, in reality, we have been putting a lot of pressure on the Mexican government from the social organizations so that they can take on our real sovereignty, and they can continue sending petroleum or oil, because we talk a lot from the point of view of the government, oh, we're defending our sovereignty. But when the Trump government said no more oil, then we closed off the tap and we stopped sending that oil. So also, it was to be in solidarity, but also because Cuba paid for it. So we are pressuring as civil society organizations, and I think that all of us from our different organizations should continue putting pressure. I'm not saying that you all can put pressure on the Mexican government. That's our job as Mexican organizations, but demanding our different governments that they stop, and that we could create this pressure and make it clear to them that this is like a genocidal effort to block off energy and oil shipments to Cuba. That's the first point. The second is that it'd be very important, having heard from you all and heard the emotion in your voices and your hearts as Naida shared. It would be worthwhile if you all would be able to do like a short message, like maybe 2 minutes or max 3 minutes, that we would be able to share on the May 1st and the May Day events. You know, some kind of short little video that we could reproduce and share. Yeah, no problem. And I think that would be really, really important. Because, for example, we might be able to share it on the Chicago May Day event and in other places across the US. I think that would be highly important. But we could also share it in Mexico, and we'll also be holding marches and events on May 1st. So I think that would be very important. If you're able to do that, please. Yeah, we'll do it.
Thank you, Mariluz. Nida, I want to respect your time and know that you need to get going pretty soon. Is there anything that you would like to close with? Because I know you need to get going out of the office.
Just a huge hug, massive hug to all of you. And our thanks to have had this opportunity to share our feelings and to share our emotions as Cuban educators and Cuban population. Thank you for everything that you do in support of us, and we'll continue forever. And so, huge hug, and we're definitely going to follow up on that video, and we're going to continue united together. And so, we just ask everyone for union between all of us, and more unity between all of our diversity. So I have to run, and I send a huge kiss to all of you. You know, we have to go quickly so that we can get a ride home.
Yeah.
So if you allow us, we'll step out now.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you both so much for joining us, and stay strong. Solidarity.
Thanks to everyone. Always thankful to all of you. Yes, and we'll keep going until we win. Yeah. Long live free Cuba. Long live all the peoples of America.
Viva.
Together.
Viva. And so I can open it up if there's other questions or comments for our other two presenters, Mariluz or Jackson. Any conversation? Or are there thoughts that came up?
I mean, I might ask Mariluz if we could share her president between the United States and Mexico.
I don't know if Myrna's there, but Myrna might say we'll give her to you. Yeah, here I am. But I didn't hear what you were saying. I said Jackson asked if we could lend out Claudia Sheinbaum as the president. And I said if Myrna was there, maybe you would say like you can just have her. No worries. Yeah, I'll get you a bow to wrap her up. But speaking seriously, we, as all of you know, we've been struggling for many years to manage to have a change in our country, transformation in our country, in which social justice was a reality. And besides that, it's a struggle so that there could be like not a democratic capitalism, not shared prosperity, but rather a true transformation from the root. So when I say radical, I mean that from the root. So unfortunately, we know that the current president comes from, yes, from the left of the country, but she has a lot of commitments. And aside from that, she's also limited by the current context in the world. And so we have a lot of difficulties. As social movements, we continue to bring up these issues. And a phrase that we have as the national coordinating body of educational workers says, whoever is in power, we will be defending our rights. And that's something really important to keep in mind, because we have been facing, especially in the field of education, we've been facing a huge swath of neoliberal policies. So she hasn't broken with those practices. And now we have like a light side and a dark side in the government. Issues. For instance, there has been a rise in the minimum wage. There's been less presence of extreme poverty. But for example, we're going to have to hold a campaign against fracking in Mexico. Claudia Sheinbaum, from the time of her campaign for the presidency, and also from López Obrador's campaign and presidency, there was the commitment that in Mexico, it was prohibited to use fracking to get access to oil and gas. You all know that this technique is extremely aggressive against nature. It totally pollutes water. It rips apart territories. And for instance, like you can't have any agriculture there afterwards. So nowadays, right now, this is a discussion. This is a debate in our country. They're justifying it, saying they're going to put together a scientific committee who could tell them how to do fracking without so much environmental damage. But that doesn't exist. So, for instance, that's one example. But yeah, of course. But if we compare between Claudia Sheinbaum and Trump, we would stick with Claudia Sheinbaum. But that's clear.
Thank you, Mariluz. I think I see one more question, then I'll turn it back to Mariluz and Jackson for any concluding remarks, and then we will wrap up for the evening. So Gloria, please jump in.
Yeah, I want to thank Rosemary for having invited me to this talk. I live in California, and I still have a question that I wanted to ask Mariluz to see if she could answer. What I understood was that President Sheinbaum didn't allow Trump's bullying around sending oil to Cuba, that she didn't like respect his bullying, but maybe I missed some news, or maybe she changed her mind. Sorry if I'm a little bit out of it, but I was curious a little bit of where I could learn more, like what media sources I could look at to find out more about that, to find out a little bit more. I just am confused about this part, so I just wanted to see where I could learn more. Andrea, you want me to answer now?
Sure, why don't you go ahead and then just keep going into a few closing remarks.
Thank you so much for your question, Gloria. Maybe I wasn't very clear how I expressed myself. So first of all, as the comrade from from Cuba mentioned, the Mexican people and government have had to continue being close to Cuba against the blockade. So that's always existed, that closeness historically has existed. And until January this year, up until January this year, there were two ways of sending oil to Cuba. The ones who sent oil to Cuba from America, from Latin America, we were Venezuela, Mexico. Just those two countries that provided oil to Cuba. Cuba purchased oil. In other words, they paid Mexico for the oil. But also there was a quantity of oil that was being sent like in solidarity as part of an agreement with the Mexican government. So when Trump threatened to say that he wasn't going to let any countries sell oil to Cuba, the Mexican government stopped sending oil. That began in February this year. So in January, they still gave the oil, but starting in February, they stopped. And there has been a an outcry from the civil society organizations in Mexico saying you need to take on our sovereignty. If we're a sovereign country, then we need to continue selling oil to Cuba as well as giving the solidarity donation of oil. It was big news. I mean, the president said it. She said it in her conferences. What did the Mexican government say? They said they knew that there was opposition from a large sector of the population in Mexico. So what she said is like, okay, we're going to do a campaign to gather supplies and support to Cuba. So it was other kinds of like goods that we sent to Cuba, but not oil. So that kind of solidarity is important, but gathering together some goods from universities, us as teachers, us as union members, we also were gathering supplies. But nonetheless, it's not oil. So I don't know if that's a little clearer.
Thank you, Mary-Luz. And Jackson, if you'd like to jump in, there's a question for you in the chat and maybe any final thoughts that you have. The question was, in what cities are teachers looking very mobilized for May 1st?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It looks like about 12 to 15 cities have some kind of labor community anchor capable of pushing a no work, no school, no shopping activity that will be of some consequence, similar to what we saw in Minneapolis on January 23rd. Now, that being said, um, we're hearing in North Carolina, teachers are taking personal days. Certainly that's happening in Chicago, hearing about it in Madison, Wisconsin. So there's a lot of different places where, perhaps it's service workers like in Atlanta, versus educators like in the three cities I've mentioned. So it kind of depends on the geography. But what we do know is people are getting agitated and they're worried and they're pissed off and prices are out of control and they're living paycheck to paycheck and there's less and less sort of health care available and it's more expensive. Rent is getting higher. So that compound that with a war nobody thought made sense in the first place, compound that with attacks on their union rights, on basic things that help fund public education. And I think we're kind of seeing a growing coalition of people from different walks of life across all 50 states. And yeah, I mean, I think that's the model of good organizing is that we can't stop, we won't stop. Let's keep building a movement that can transform the things that, were already problematic and got us here in the first place to ensure that we have what we need, like childcare for all, healthcare for all, housing for all, international human rights that actually are a requirement, not an option. Ensuring that we are building hospitals, not bombing them, building housing, not destroying it. So these are just basic things that I think are becoming clearer, and it's our job to help people understand what's a path to transformation, not a path to our shared destruction and loss of life and loss of rights.
Thank you, Jackson. I think we are going to wrap up. So I just want to thank everyone for being here today. And I think there's some very concrete actions that we can also take coming out of this, because it's great to come together in a webinar, but what happens next? So I think Jackson shared the link, or maybe Steve did, to some of the May Day actions if you're in the US. I knew that it was getting a lot of traction when my 80-year-old mother was planning which rally she was going to, which is terrific to see. Um, there are very specific actions to take in solidarity with Cuba right now. That's really urgent, to try to both the material support as well as the solidarity and the awareness support and lobbying governments. And then, as the Trinational, our next conference will be in Toronto, and Jen's here from OSSTF, the Ontario Teachers Federation, which will be hosting. And that will be November 13th to 15th in Toronto. And very much the conversations at that conference will be building on and extending what we've talked about today. So both an analysis, a shared analysis of these dynamics across the Americas, and what actions can we continue to drive forward to really bring about change and different ways of living together. So Steve has also posted in the chat the links to the webinar, and we will be getting that up if there's other folks that you would like to share this with. We really appreciate that. And just a huge thank you to all of you for your time today and for all of the work that you do, and Jackson and Marie-Luz for coming and sharing with us as well. Thank you. And have a good night, everyone. Gracias. Everyone. Yes.
Thanks to the interpreters.
Yeah.
Thanks to Matthew, Martha.
Yes.